right, awesome. This is again just a heads up on the National Pavement Preservation Conference that'll be happening in Indianapolis, Indiana, on May 17th through 20th next year. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. Now let's get to the questions. Greg, one of the first questions was wrap chip seal is very hard on equipment. Any best practices for keeping the equipment clean and functional? Daily power washes?
Thank you, Scott. I don't have any best practices from New Mexico or San Bernardino County where they were doing their own chip seal application. We did observe, or there were reports at the National Center where the wrap materials were difficult to feed through the feeder on the sloped pavement, specifically in the super elevation sections of the curve, and there could have been some hanging up there. I would refer that to Lisa. I'm not aware of the best practices for equipment dealing with wrap.
Yeah, Lisa, feel free to weigh in. There's a couple of these that you probably have some expertise on as well.
We found that there's difference between the virgin chips and the rips as far as equipment wear. So nothing special that you have to do to clean out the chip blocks.
Next one, I think this one's on the wrap for you also, Greg, is the gradation determined, binder ignition, burn.
That's correct. Most folks are running an as-is gradation, especially for slurry and micro. Folks are trying to determine what the apparent gradation is, where you have the fine particles that are collected onto the coarser particles, or where you have an agglomeration of fine particles stuck together. That apparent gradation as it exists in the pile may be quite a bit different than what an extracted gradation is. And so the report is going to key on that in a couple of tables. If you're looking at a typical ISSA slurry gradation, for example, the wrap products unextracted are going to be quite a bit coarser than what a typical virgin aggregate gradation will be. And subsequently, after the wrap materials are extracted, they're going to be quite a bit finer than what allowable tolerances are. So that's a great question. Agencies have to recognize that the gradation band is going to be a little bit different. You know, Lisa is adjusting the gradation for her coarse aggregate for a chip seal to achieve the gradation that they want. But folks that are looking at the fine fraction are really they're going to need to accept what they get, or recognize that it's not always going to be possible to meet that manufactured aggregate specification for gradation.
And Lisa, there's a couple questions here about stockpiles. How long can you keep a seal coat aggregates in a stockpile before you start having problems with clumping? And is there anything that you can do to keep wrap fines from clumping in the heat?
So what we've observed is that most of the asphalt is going to actually be in the fines, which is part of the waste. We haven't really seen any of our wrap chip seal stockpiles start clumping together. And like I said, we're about a year ahead out of the chip seal crew will be using. So what we're putting now, they'll use not this season, but next season. So we haven't heard anything from the crews saying that any of those stockpiles are starting to clump together.
And I've got a question that kind of follows on to that. So are you guys looking at maybe utilizing those fines in slurries or microsurfacing?
In New Mexico, one of our southern districts actually tried to utilize the fines or the waste in a slurry seal. And what ended up happening is that there was a lot of bleeding. I think just because of that additional binder that's in the fines, it didn't quite work out the way they anticipated. So as far as our district, we've never tried it in a slurry seal, but still trying to figure out the best way to use that material. This
is one for Mike on a couple on some of the mastics. Is asphalt rubber greater than 15% perm rubber considered a mastic? And also, are those guides for the mastics specifications that you're developing available?
Yes, they are. They're published. The 8260 specification is available on on the ASTM website. It was published in January of this year. And so absolutely. And we encourage people to go in and look at that and study through it. There's a lot of valuable information inside the specification. As far as rubber, asphalt rubber, these materials, I don't know if they would really fit into that type of a classification. I guess they could work in some portions of this, but mostly these materials, they probably do have, you know, some content of tire rubber in them, but the polymer that's in these materials is more like SBS, and there are other polymers too that are used, but in order to be able to get the kind of control that you need from hot climate to cold climate, to being able to park on top of the materials, it really and also be able to resist pushing and shoving, like at intersections, or if you have heavy truck traffic that, you know, where there's a curve in the road, it really requires like heavy modification with polymers that have elastic recovery.
Very interesting. And again, that falls into that whole idea of moving the binder selection process into the environmental conditions that they're performing in. So Larry, there's a few questions here talking about there's a lot of interest in the development of those emulsion specs, where those might be available online, some of the construction stuff, even I know they're not, maybe some of them may not be approved yet, but some of those draft materials, are those available for anybody to review?
Yeah, Scott, they're available on the AASHTO website. For state agencies, there's no cost, and there's a upcharge for non-state agencies, non-members of AASHTO, but they're all available. We expect to have the construction guide specs and the quality assurance specs, if everything goes well. We're hoping to have those late fall. Once they're approved, then AASHTO will publish those. It may take a month or so for AASHTO to get those online, but they will be approved and ready to go.
Finally, Lisa, a couple more questions for you in terms of, I believe you said the fine material, what you classify as waste or the fines, is a 1/4 inch minus. And then also, there's a possibility, they also asked, could it be used as a sand seal, maybe on top of the chip seals?
Normally, we haven't sand sealed in a long time. So usually what we do is we actually fog seal our chip seals. That is a possibility of the sand seals. I think they won't be as dusty as traditional sand seals. So it actually might work. It'd be something that we look into.
And with that, I think that's about all the questions that we have for today. Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe and have a good fall.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.